The absence of God is fundamentally a shadow and light, us and them situation. In the first place, we've had a rough time looking directly at what we suppress of our subconscious. It turns out, and don't worry, it's totally safe to admit all this, we're worse humans than we thought. Alas, we're sunk. It's the pits. Additionally, though, our own avoidance of shadow has made us seem surrounded by jerks. And I suppose that's not untrue. It's just incomplete. Because while we say jerks suck, we're jerks and quite busy sucking ourselves. The Logos is using others, see, to mirror back to us what we're still reluctant to look at in ourselves. And if we've made the mistake of equating divine presence with pleasant or attractive things, it's a formula that equals divine absence. Mary shows us and them thinking isn't fulfillment. She comes to the empty tomb and says, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him. Even Mary Magdalene says to the gardener, Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. The apostles demonstrate another little flaw. Absence is not fulfillment. Peter and the other disciple arrive at the empty tomb. The other disciple hesitates. Peter enters the tomb. Then the other disciple follows him in, and the word says he saw and believed. But even the scriptures tell us that such belief is incomplete. They say something like, for they did not yet understand that Christ was to rise from the dead. When the gardener said Mary's name, it flips a switch, just as it happened with the disciples at Emmaus. When a word or action Jesus did during his earthly life was repeated by a stranger, the feeling of absence was replaced by a feeling of Jesus' presence. And this is not novel. It's a normal thing that happens while grieving. My grandmother died before I entered the monastery. She had a particular facial expression she'd wear when she was acknowledging things she couldn't change. Kind of like that. Later, my novice master made a similar facial expression. And the feeling that my grandmother was in the room was palpable. I don't discount Jesus' physical appearance changing from a stranger to something familiar. I just don't think that's necessary. Our absent loved ones only need something mildly familiar, but then they use that to convey real presence. I have a theory too about the Holy Spirit. I've had psychologists tell me that spiritual awakening typically happens for people the first time they consciously modify their breathing. Hindus will tell you that the breath cycle has, in fact, three parts, not two. The in breath, the out breath, and what's called the kumbhaka, that moment of held breath between the two. It's often, they say, in the kumbhaka that the kundalini, or the spirit within, rises. Additionally, Buddhists will tell you that there are times when meditation and our nervous systems intersect that our breathing stops. They say the thing to do is not force yourself to breathe or get caught in a fear response, but instead to shift your attention to positive or neutral sensation. Think about the apostles locked in the upper room for fear of the Jews, says the text. Do you hear the us and them thinking? They're all Jews. Anyway, remember that their teacher had just been atrociously, publicly, horribly executed by the state. They're most likely afraid that they're next. I imagine there might have been a knock on the door, or maybe they heard a voice outside. I don't know. I do know that when we are afraid, our breathing stops. We know as much from every child in every horror movie hiding under a desk, trying not to breathe. So you can picture There's a noise. The apostles hold their breath as a fear response. The Spirit rises. The apostles have a breakthrough and can shift their feelings about absence into an acknowledgement of a different kind of presence. And all of a sudden, the stranger can be Jesus because fear has become awe. And then there's Thomas. We know the story. He wanted to poke at Jesus' wounds. It was a condition of his belief. But he'd also spent his time with Jesus getting to know his own wounds and how defensive they made him. Everyone always wonders why Thomas didn't actually poke Jesus, but I think it was the speed with which Jesus lowered his defenses and allowed it. I think that was the transformative part. Trauma had made Jesus both gentle and able to be vulnerable. Speed of vulnerability was the real act of faith, not let me hurt you to prove something to myself, which is all fine. But of course, the ultimate question of any practitioner is, so what? So what if, while grieving, familiar deeds manifest absent loved ones like they're present? So what if quick vulnerability manifests the divine more than probing people's woundedness? So what if held breaths awaken our ability to feel on increasingly subtle levels, transform our fear into awe, or show strangers to be absent teachers? So what? God revealed himself only for this, that we might get over ourselves more quickly and return to listening, breathing, feeling. Christ came in history only for this, that by actively accepting aversions and letting go of attractions, we might see clearly the effects of our thoughts. The Spirit welled up inside and outside us only for this, that we might feel things more subtle than our adrenaline besotted ego stare in the face of the new creation we're becoming until we notice how much we already look alike. And before thinking about what it means or what we should do about it, we should hush. The becoming to which we are witness, this happens on the other side of hundreds of little deaths. Both the cross and the rolled away stone happened in silence. My job and yours is to listen until there is no longer a self who hears.